And we are live. I hope. So if somebody can post a message in the chat box and let us know if we are connecting to you on the interwebs, that's sort of the first step making this thing work. I hear sometimes LinkedIn Live doesn't work, but we should be kind of shooting across the web on Facebook, Periscope, if that's still a thing, Twitch. Yeah, I see it. Going live. Awesome. So usually I'll start off these sessions by quickly orienting folks and letting them know like why I'm doing this. And that is because I want to provide an opportunity to allow folks to pick my brain about all things related to getting the first role in software engineering. I've been both hiring folks and teaching folks software engineering for quite some time now. So there's probably some little gems, little nuggets that I can share. And that's really the intent of this, is just to provide an opportunity for people to ask questions if they're on the job hunt, looking for a first career in software, or maybe, early on. I think once you've been in it for a while, the process to get from position to position gets much easier. But getting that first opportunity, that's quite a challenge for a lot of folks. So if you have questions, the way this works is type them into the comment box. That will shoot them over through the interwebs, thanks to the genius of, all those folks. And they'll see them, and I'll answer them in the order in which they are received. So it's just that simple. I usually talk at the beginning a little bit about sort of anything that came up over the past week in terms of other folks that I encounter that are, maybe trying to get that first opportunity, trying to figure out what the process is, dialing in what works for them. And so this week, I'll just mention interaction that I had on LinkedIn. There's an individual that was sort of struggling with the process of going through code challenges, and give sort of my general approach and philosophy around code challenges and what I think is most constructive and helpful for people that are, again, trying to get your first role. So I'll preface it by saying that working on code challenges on your own is not nearly as valuable as working on code challenges with other people. If you can get another human involved and you can work as a pair to solve a code challenge, it is way more helpful. And here's why. Because it will help you to articulate your thought process and communicate in a technical way, which are the essential skills that you will use during the interview when you're solving a code challenge. It's not just about knowing the appropriate algorithm and how to do the pseudocode or the actual code. It's far more important to actually be able to communicate and talk while you're thinking and explain your thought process to other people, because in essence, that's what they're screening for during a code challenge interview. They're screening to see not only how you solve challenges, what that process looks like, but also, are you effective in communicating your ideas and how you approach problem solving, so that when you get stuck, you can get help. Because as a junior engineer, you're going to get stuck a lot and you're going to need help. And if you can't communicate those things, then it's going to be a real challenge to help you thrive in that environment. So I think one of the things that people least appreciate as a junior engineer in that process of interviewing and doing code challenges is the interviewer is looking to see how you approach the problem, not the solutions. It's like they used to say in math class, it's more about showing the work than it is about getting the right solution. So really, really, really focus on that. It is really important to go through the process and have a process that helps you to draw out your thought process clearly so that you can visually represent it, how you destructure and pattern recognize and all those things that are involved in computational thinking and selecting the right algorithm to solve your problem. And that is 90% of the code challenge. If you mess up and you pick the wrong algorithm or you can't implement the code solution, not as big of a deal as long as you can walk them through what your thought process is. On the flip side, I've had individuals that they stand in front of the whiteboard in silence, and when I ask them, hey, what are you thinking? What's your thought process? They will respond like, I'm thinking about how to solve this. And I'm just like, dude, that's not going to endear you to the hiring manager. So instead, you should be focused on really going through that process and practicing it the same way you would when you apply it. So my advice to that individual was, because he's rather frustrated with the code challenges, you probably should just like not do as many code challenges then, and really focus on like passion projects and actually spend more of your time working on passion projects. That would be more helpful at the stage of the process that he was at. So that's also something that I harp on a lot, but I think it's really, really critical. And I had lots of employer partners and folks that I just know out in the space that jumped on the thread and they're like, yeah, listen to what he said, because that's actually how I go through that process. That's how I assess candidates, is I look to see not just how are they performing during the interview, but like what else are they bringing to the table? What are their demonstratable skills that I might be able to see on their portfolio, in their GitHub, or the projects that they bring to cover during an interview. So it's also a good idea. Like bring some projects to the interview that you can walk through. It's a great way to filibuster, right? You can fill the time talking about all the great things you've built and have less time of them peppering you with questions, right? They could be peppering you with questions about your project instead of like esoteric questions about what is the this in JavaScript. You know, the this, not this. So couple questions, well, at least one question in a comment. Hey, Mike, how long is the normal time frame to be looking for that first job? So if we're talking about first job in tech, I would say if you're doing an efficient job search and you've done the legwork, so you're qualified, this isn't you've got to get your skill up. You've already graduated from a program, or you've been self-taught and you're ready to be in the market, ready to be looking for work. I'd say 6 weeks would be a reasonable amount of time to do a job search if you're executing well. And so when I say executing well, what do I mean? I mean doing the research on the companies before you apply to them, finding internal champions inside those organizations that know you and would be, or at least are getting to know you and would be willing to be in your corner, and at least make sure your resume makes it out of the waste bin and into a potential slot for a phone screening, right? You're not going to be able to like nail an internal champion and have them say you're hired, but instead, as long as they can be a supporter, that's super duper helpful. And then you're applying to a reasonable number of jobs every week. So that's like 10. I usually tell people 10 a week, 10 good reach out, follow up, application process type attempts. And 6 weeks is probably what it will take. You will probably get 2 or 3 interviews. The first one is going to be rough, might not go so well, but there'll be a lot of learning that might take place at that first interview. And then 1 or 2 more interviews is usually enough time for a junior engineer to get someone that's willing to take a chance and hire them and bring them into the organization, recognizing the value that they're going to bring over time as they develop and get better. Right? You're not selling anybody that your current skill set is going to be game changing for their organization. What you're convincing them of is you're worth making the investment in. You're going to learn, you're going to grow, and one day you're going to be a senior engineer inside of their organization. That's what your task is to convince the individual that that is you, and that's why you're more qualified for this job than anybody else. You're going to work harder. You're going to put the effort in. You've got the grit. You've got the core skills. You've got the basic fundamentals under your belt, and you're ready to grow and be a part of the organization. Right? That's your job. And so it isn't going to require 10 interviews, hopefully. It's going to require 2 or 3. And then you work backwards. Well, to get 2 or 3 jobs, you need X number of phone screenings. To get to X number of phone screenings, you need X number of applications. And so I think if you're just doing 10 a week of quality reach outs, you'll get there in 6 weeks. So, Diego, that was kind of a long answer, but I think that is applicable. We've had students that have completed our boot camp program in the past and gotten jobs like way faster than 6 weeks. And then there are some that don't do anything I tell them to do. It takes them way longer. So, I mean, it's really up to the individual to put the effort forward, but it also has to be smart and efficient. And if you're just wasting your time with shotgun approach, clicking the one-click apply on Indeed, just click, 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 you're not getting anywhere. So it's going to take you a long time. So. Gregory has a question. Thoughts on mock interview effectiveness, given a coding problem, solving in 45 minutes? I think it's just one part. So if I'm doing an interview, I tend to try and keep the interview to about an hour. And I don't think it's that efficient to have them spend 45 minutes out of that hour trying to solve one challenge. So I actually like to, when I'm giving in a mock interview, well, not mock interview, but when I'm given a real interview and I'm given about an hour to talk to a candidate, I like to give them 2 problems that could be solved within about half of that time. So 2 15-minute problems. And then I'd spend about the rest of the other half hour doing a behavioral-based interview process where I ask them questions that will hopefully help me to elicit where they are skill-wise, what their emotional intelligence is, some of those other core competencies that I'm looking for, like resourcefulness, grit, accountability, their diligence, poor past performance at the job that they had previously, how they like to be led, all those kinds of qualities. So I think if you're doing mock interviews, you're doing practice sessions, I think you should reasonably, again, spend about that much time being able to very quickly break a problem down, make sure you understand its constraints, walk through your thought process on how to solve it, and be able to solve it, and do that in a short period of time. I think 45 minutes doesn't give you a great chance as employer, as a hiring partner. If you use all the time to solve one problem, I think it's better to give the person 2 approaches or 2 problems to solve. That way, you just get a better look, in my opinion. So, I've also seen, in one of the strategies that I like to use when I'm giving mock or giving questions, is I like to give one question where it's like a greenfield, like solve this challenge. Here's the problem I'm trying to solve. And then I like to give here's some code. Can you debug this code? Because to me, it's vital for a junior engineer to be able to use some kind of a process to debug. And so in some cases, they might open up the console and immediately start looking at the errors and working backwards. In other cases, folks want to study the code and they spend a lot of time just reading and reviewing the code. So it's interesting to see the process they actually use and see how effective it is. So it could be helpful then to have 2 different types of questions so you can see 2 different skill sets. So if you're specifically asking about whether or not you should do some practice interviews and mock interviews, sure, I think it's helpful to sort of shake some of the cobwebs off and make sure that you've got a couple dry runs before you're in front of someone that could actually make a hiring decision. So I think they are effective in that regard for sure. Plus, it's not that much time, so you might as well get some practice under your belt if you can. What other questions do folks have? I kind of rolling a little slower today, so I'm doing a little song and dance right now. But whatever platform you're on, if you leave a message in the comments, then it definitely does come through. How many folks are on like Facebook and LinkedIn? Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I can't tell because it's all rolled into one interface. But if you could pop a little message in the chat box and say you're here or where you're from or what platform you're on, that would be super helpful because it would help me to know just how many folks are on different platforms. Because I think there are different ways for people to leave messages in the different ones, other than I guess they're all comments, but just weird where they are sometimes. That said, let me look and see if there's any questions we had left over from last time or my email. Just check those really quickly and seeing a few questions come through. So I'll get to those in just a sec. Spam, and lots more spam. So got a lot of spam. Let me just check this other one and make sure. Okay, good. No questions there. Okay, so from last time, I think I covered. Yeah, I think I covered everything. Great. Okay, so that said, I didn't have any questions to catch up from last time, but I see a couple more coming through. So Stephanie in Oceanside. What's up, Oside? Okay. Another question that came through. Thoughts on mock interview effectiveness. Given a coding problem to solve in 45 minutes. We already did that one, sorry. Do you have any books you can recommend that would help prepare for an interview, assuming they go to a junior dev position using JS? Okay, so the the main book that everybody kind of touts is Cracking the Code Interview. And I think it could be useful to get that just because it does reinforce sort of that process and the breakdown of how you solve problems. It could also be interesting to see if you could solve some of those problems that are in that book using JavaScript. So for a JavaScript specific, it would be interesting because JavaScript does not have some of the types that are available in other languages. And so because of that, you might use different data structures and different types to solve problems. And you actually have all of the pieces where you could build some of the more sophisticated data structures in JavaScript. They're just not given to you automatically or out of the box, right? So I think it could be constructive. That would probably be the best book out there for a software engineer to have, to be ready for the practice that it takes to get into not just entry-level jobs, but as you get into more advanced mid-level and trying to go after some senior or roles at much, much larger like FANG organizations, Cracking the Code Interview is going to be your best bet. So folks are on LinkedIn, I see that. That's awesome. Can I give an example of a challenge problem that I've seen or give to an applicant? Sure. So it's always going to be relevant to or specific to the type of role. So if I'm interviewing someone for a design role, I might give them technical interview questions that have more to do with like, how would you lay out this page? Or I might ask them a question like, can you explain to me what mobile first means? And how does that impact the process that you use to build a website or design a website? So if it were a software engineering role for, let's say, a junior software engineer, I might start with something simpler if I detect that the candidate has already said that they're on the earlier part of their skill set and they're not super confident. I might start with something like FizzBuzz and say, can you code out FizzBuzz? And so for those of you that don't know what that means, I guess I should explain. So it's sort of a take on a drinking game, and that is you go around and you say numbers and you ignore or don't say certain numbers. And if they are, for example, divisible by 3, then you might say fizz. If their number is divisible by 5, then you might say buzz. And if it's divisible by 3 and 5, you might say FizzBuzz. But if you have a number that is not divisible by any of those, then you just say the number. And so you just kind of go around and each person either says the number, fizz, buzz, or FizzBuzz. So if you wanted to build an algorithm that could help print those numbers out, they might ask you, they'll explain that scenario and ask you, okay, so can you print out the numbers, fizz, buzz, or FizzBuzz? On the other side, hey, what's up, Antonio? It's on YouTube. I like it. All right. So that might be one that I would give to someone that I was like detecting that they didn't feel super confident, because I just want to see, can they crush it? Can they take one that's pretty straightforward? Can they just crush their thought process, drawing it out? Give me some examples of how they're thinking about solving it, and then solving it in sort of an elegant and not complex way, right? So probably don't want to see like switch statements, right? Probably want to see, a few lines of code that can show that the individual can really think through. Well, if I exit under this condition right away, we're good to go. So the more advanced might be something like, given a string, can you determine if it's a palindrome and then respond with true or false, right? So that might be a little bit more complicated. First off, I'd explain what a palindrome is, and then go into the mechanics of like letting them figure out which way they're going to loop and construct a mechanism to solve that challenge. Probably wouldn't ask a question that has anything to do with recursion, because that'd be really hard for a brand new person or a junior developer. But if it's a large organization, tougher job to get into, they might ask some of the more tough, like recursion, something that uses a tree-like structure, so binary tree. They might ask for like binary tree recursion, and you're just like, all right, cool. I don't even know what that is. So not super useful for most software engineering roles as a junior engineer, but it is a commonly used algorithm that might be asked in a more challenging, like senior software engineering role. So you want to ask questions that are specific to the type of role that you're screening for, because you want to determine, are they a good fit for the role that you have. Eric asks, I see a lot of companies say you need a bachelor's or equivalent experience. What would be the equivalent experience to a bachelor's degree? Good question. In my opinion, the equivalent experience is 1 to 2 years of experience writing code, but that's going to be subject to like everybody's own personal preference. I think if you've spent 1 to 2 years writing software, you're pretty much going to be at the same point that someone that graduates from a CS degree is going to be able to hit the ground and cover in the first few years of their career. Both will be at sort of an equal spot. Now, after the first few years, you may advance into a role where it requires that you a lot more of a ability to design and architect larger and more performant solutions. And then you might see the person with the CS degree start to break away and get more opportunities than somebody that doesn't have the CS degree. But it depends on what you built over that first few years. If you got a chance to wear a lot of hats and be inside of some shops where you're working along some smart people working on pretty cool technology, you might be able to like really build up your chops on some of that algorithm and design work that is necessary to build something that performs well, that scales. And you may get an opportunity to work in a language that is a pretty performant language, right? So you could take someone that could spend 10 years building WordPress websites using PHP and compare them to somebody that spends 1 year working in Rust building, some sort of a streaming, application that uses like, cryptocurrency or something that, is maybe more algorithmically intensive, and they just have more challenges that they have to solve, and they get better practice over that same period of time or over a much shorter period of time, right? So it really does depend on what you're doing and the amount of time, if that makes sense. So combination of the two. It's how many hats do you get to wear? So how much technology do you actually get to touch and get involved in? And across that technology that you touch and that you're involved in, overall, how much experience do you get? And you can get a lot of experience in a short period of time if you're in the right organization, you get the right opportunity. And you can always work on passion projects. So that is another way that you can build up your experience without necessarily getting paid for it, but you can control how much time you want to spend on the weekends and the evening, just grinding it out to make sure you're ready for that first opportunity when it comes. Tony Silva, what's going on, man? I like seeing you here. Any other questions? If not, we're going to shut it down early. So I'm giving you the early warning. Love doing this, but I want to make sure we're efficient with our time. And so if we don't get any more questions in the next few minutes, we'll shut it down. We'll reschedule. Same thing next week. We're going to probably go. Let's look at my schedule just to make sure. Yeah, we're back to 12 o'clock next week. Just a little early today. I got a board meeting I got to go to after this, so I had to shift the schedule around a little bit. What do you guys think of this time? Is this a better time slot? Is this a worse time slot? Is this a time slot where no one likes to chat? Because that's not effective. But, hey, what's up, Andrew? My network coming through. So I think this is an effective time right around noon because it helps us with folks that might be like maybe taking a lunch break and want to have something cool to watch and look at while they're eating their lunch. Also on the East Coast, maybe people getting closer to the tail end of their day. But most importantly, for job seekers. So if you know anybody that's looking for a job, tell them to hit me up. This is a place to ask questions. I get a lot of rando questions throughout the week, and sometimes I just like jot them down and I'll make sure that they're covered here. But this is a fantastic opportunity to get them covered live and go a little bit deeper in the event that you want to go a little bit beyond just what I can type into a chat response. All right. Not seeing any other questions. I am seeing people say hello, which I appreciate. And especially ballers like Andrew, man. Want to be like you, want to live that lifestyle. Software engineer. All right. I think that's it for today. We're going to cut it short, but let folks know this is a great opportunity. We'll do this every week until every human that wants a job gets a job in tech. All right. Later.